The conference room at Kingston Sons felt more like an execution chamber that morning. 5 pairs of eyes watched me with varying degrees of contempt as I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, my father's ultimatum still hanging in the air like poison. "The papers are quite straightforward, Alexandra," my older brother Marcus said, his voice dripping with that familiar condescension. "You sell your shares back to the family trust at the agreed-upon price. Clean break, everyone moves on." I looked down at the document before me, 20 pages of legal jargon that essentially erased my stake in Kingston Technologies, the company my grandfather had built from nothing. The company I'd helped transform from a struggling manufacturing business into a tech powerhouse over the last decade. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad's fist hit the table hard enough to make his coffee cup rattle. "Then you're out. No family, no inheritance, no connections. You'll be completely cut off." I studied his face, the face that had once beamed with pride when I graduated top of my class from NIT, before Marcus had convinced him that women shouldn't run tech companies. The face that had smiled in family photos before my mother's death, before his new wife Amanda had decided I was a threat to her son's future control of the company. "You're really willing to disown your daughter over this?" I kept my voice steady, professional, the same voice I'd used in countless board meetings, while Marcus took credit for my innovations. "You brought this on yourself." Amanda cut in, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on Dad's arm. "If you just played your role, accepted the position we offered." Ah, yes, the position. Head of Community Relations, a fancy title for planning charity galas and looking pretty in press photos. Never mind my patents, my technical expertise, or the fact that I'd developed the quantum processing architecture that now powered Kingston's most profitable product line. "The price is more than fair," Marcus added, sliding a pen toward me. $10 million for your shares." Most people would jump at that offer. I picked up the pen, weighing it in my hand. $10 million for shares worth at least 50 times that amount. Shares that represented 15 years of my life, countless sleepless nights, and innovations that had transformed the industry. "And Tommy?" I asked, thinking of my younger brother, the only one who'd ever supported my role in the company. "Where is he in all this?" "Tommy understands what's best for the family," Dad growled, "unlike some people." I noticed he didn't mention that Tommy was conspicuously absent from this meeting. Probably because he would have objected, would have reminded them of all I'd contributed. But Tommy was in Hong Kong, managing our Asian operations, conveniently far from this family coup. "The offer expires in 10 minutes, Marcus said, checking his Rolex, the same model he'd bought for all the board members last Christmas, using company funds, of course. "After that, we go with Plan B." Ah, yes, Plan B. The carefully orchestrated campaign to discredit me, to question my contributions, to suggest that my recent erratic behavior made me unfit for any role in the company. They'd been laying that groundwork for months. I looked around the table one last time. Dad, once my hero, now just another angry man who couldn't handle a daughter smarter than his son. Amanda, the stepmother who'd spent 8 years undermining me at every turn. Marcus, the brother who'd never forgiven me for understanding technology better than he did. And the lawyers, blank-faced men in expensive suits, paid well to witness this family destruction. I signed. The scratch of pen on paper seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. I signed all 20 pages, each signature perfectly matched to my official records. Then I stood, smoothing my charcoal gray suit, the same one I'd worn to Mom's funeral 5 years ago. Wonderful. Amanda practically purred. Now we can all move forward. Yes, I agreed, gathering my things. We can. Marcus was already reaching for the papers, probably eager to file them before I could change my mind. Security will escort you out. Your office has already been cleared. Of course it had. They'd probably started packing it up the moment I entered the building. One question, I said, pausing at the door. Did any of you actually read the quarterly reports I submitted to the board? The technical documentation? The patent filings? Dad waved his hand dismissively. That's what we have teams for. Right? I nodded. Teams, of course. I left them there, followed the security guard to the building I'd practically lived in for the past 15 years. Past the R&D labs where I'd developed the technologies that had saved the company. Past the engineers who looked away, ashamed or afraid to meet my eyes. Past the wall of awards, many of them bearing my name, though I noticed those were already being taken down. In the lobby, I paused to look at the massive portrait of my grandfather, the company's founder. He'd always said that in business, like in chess, you had to think 5 moves ahead. I wondered what he'd think of today's game. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A message from my real lawyer, not the family-approved one who'd witnessed the signing. Everything in place. Countdown starting now. I smiled, thinking about the other documents being filed at this very moment. About the shell companies and investment vehicles I'd carefully constructed over the past 2 years, ever since I'd first noticed Marcus's growing influence over Dad. About the trades that would start executing automatically at midnight. They thought they'd won, thought they'd forced me to sign away my birthright for a fraction of its worth. They didn't know that I'd been preparing for this day, moving pieces into position while they were busy planning my downfall. They'd forgotten the first rule of technology: always have a backup plan. And mine was about to change everything. I started my car. Not the flashy sports car Marcus drove, but a subtle electric vehicle packed with my own modifications. As I pulled away from Kingston Technologies headquarters, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Marcus was standing at the window of the conference room, probably congratulating himself on his victory. Enjoy it while it lasts, brother, I murmured. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. My phone buzzed again. Tommy calling from Hong Kong. He'd know by now what had happened. Tell me you have a plan, he said without preamble. Don't I always? They're celebrating, he said, disgust clear in his voice. Marcus is already announcing his new leadership team. Perfect, I replied, pulling onto the highway. Let them celebrate. It'll make tomorrow more entertaining. How bad is it going to be? I thought about the cascade of trades and revelations scheduled to unfold in less than 12 hours. About the carefully constructed web of investments and partnerships that would soon reshape Kingston Technologies' entire power structure. Remember when we were kids and Marcus broke my science project the night before the fair, and you showed up the next day with an even better one that won first prize? Something like that, I smiled. Only this time, the prize is a lot bigger. The sun was setting behind me as I drove home, casting long shadows across the city. In my briefcase, a single thumb drive contained everything I'd need to show the world exactly who had really been running Kingston Technologies all these years. They thought they'd forced me to sign away my future. They were about to learn that some signatures are just the beginning. The next morning, I sat in my home office at exactly 8:57 a.m., watching 6 different screens display real-time market data, news feeds, and the internal Kingston Technologies communication channels I technically shouldn't still have access to. My phone was set to do not disturb. The chaos could wait until everything was in motion. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the first domino fell. Breaking news. Mystery investor emerges as major stakeholder in Kingston Technologies, scrolled across CNBC. Within seconds, similar headlines appeared on Bloomberg, Reuters, and every major financial news outlet. My other screens lit up with incoming data. Kingston's stock price freezing as trading was halted due to pending significant announcements. Internal emails flying between executives and board members. Frantic messages from investment banks trying to identify the new player who had quietly amassed a controlling interest in one of tech's most prestigious family companies. At 9:03 a.m., my phone started buzzing despite its settings. Marcus, Dad, Amanda, even board members I hadn't spoken to in months. I ignored them all and opened a secure message from Tommy instead. Holy shit, Lex. This is you, isn't it? The Phoenix Group. I smiled at the name I'd chosen for my investment vehicle. Phoenix Rising Technologies, because some things have to burn before they can be reborn. Watch the next announcement, I texted back. At 9:15 a.m., right on schedule, the second wave hit. Phoenix Group announces patent review of Kingston Technologies' core products. That's when the real panic started. My security system alerted me to someone at my front door. Through the cameras, I could see Marcus, his perfectly tailored suit already showing signs of stress, his face red with anger or fear, probably both. I let him pound on the door for exactly 5 minutes before remotely activating the exterior speakers. Go home, Marcus. I'm working. Working? He shouted at the camera. You're destroying the company. Dad's having chest pains. Funny how health concerns only matter when it's his wealth at stake, I replied coolly. Where was that worry when he was forcing his daughter out of her own company? This isn't a game, Alexandra. The stock is in free fall. Actually, I switched on the exterior display, showing him the same market data I was watching. Trading is just suspended. The free fall starts in about 20 minutes when it resumes. Unless what? His voice cracked slightly. Unless the board calls an emergency meeting, with all shareholders, including the new majority owner. He stared at the camera, realization finally dawning. Phoenix Group, it's you? But how? We made you sell your shares. You made me sell my direct shares, I corrected. Did you ever wonder why I took such a low price without negotiating? Why I never fought the evaluation? Too busy celebrating your victory to check what else I might own. My phone buzzed again. Tommy sending a series of laughing emojis, followed by, Marcus just called me screaming. Dad's lawyer is having a meltdown in the executive boardroom. At 9:30 a.m., trading resumed. Kingston's stock dropped 30% in the first minute. Alexandra, please. Marcus was almost whimpering now. We can talk about this. Whatever you want. Board seats, executive position, name your price. I activated the house's external screens, displaying the same presentation I'd been preparing for 2 years. Slides showing exactly how I'd built my position in the company. Small tech startups I'd quietly acquired, each holding crucial patents that Kingston's products depended on. Strategic investments made through shell companies, while Marcus was busy playing corporate politics. Key personnel who jumped ship with me, taking their expertise to companies now owned by Phoenix Group. The price, I finally said, watching his face as he absorbed the information. How about everything you tried to take from me? The company? The legacy? The future? All of it. Dad will never agree to this. Dad doesn't have a choice anymore. I own 51% of Kingston Technologies as of midnight. Check the SEC filings. He did, hands shaking as he pulled out his phone. I watched his face go pale as he verified the numbers. But the shares you signed over yesterday were less than 8% of my total holdings. Consider it a very expensive lesson in due diligence. My phone lit up with an urgent message from the board secretary. Emergency meeting called for 11 a.m. Attendance mandatory for all major shareholders. You should go home and change, I told Marcus through the speaker. You look a bit disheveled for such an important meeting. He stared at the camera for a long moment, mouth working but no words coming out. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car, shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the triumphant victor he'd been just yesterday. Once he was gone, I opened my secure line to Tommy. You're patched into the executive boardroom feed, he said without preamble. They're in complete meltdown. Amanda's already called 3 different lawyers. Dad's demanding to know how this happened. And you? Watching the best revenge plan in corporate history unfold while eating popcorn in Hong Kong. By the way, did you really buy that AI startup in Singapore last year just to get their patents before Kingston could? Among other things, I smiled, checking my other screens. The stock had stabilized at a 40% loss. Major clients were calling for reassurance about their contracts. Investment banks were scrambling to understand the new power structure. You know they're going to fight this, Tommy warned. Let them. I have one more card to play. At 10:45 a.m., I finally turned my phone back on. The messages were exactly what I expected. Threats, pleading, attempts at negotiation. But one caught my eye. A text from Mom's old assistant, Margaret. Your mother would be so proud. She always said you were the only one who really understood what power meant. I thought about Mom, about how she'd fought to keep her seat on the board, even while battling cancer. How she'd made me promise to never let anyone underestimate me just because I was a woman in tech. At 10:55 a.m., I got in my car to drive to the office. It was time to take back what was mine. And I wasn't done teaching them lessons about power. Not even close. The lobby of Kingston Technologies fell silent as I walked in at exactly 10:58 a.m. Employees who had ignored me yesterday now stared openly, phones discreetly recording as I crossed the marble floor in my signature black suit. Not the conservative corporate wear I'd been pressured to adopt, but the sleek, modern style that better reflected who I really was. Ms. Kingston, the security guard stammered, clearly unsure whether yesterday's ban was still in effect. The board, they're waiting. I know, I smiled, taking the security badge from my pocket. Not the one they'd deactivated yesterday, but a master key I'd created years ago. Another backup plan they'd never known about. The elevator ride to the top floor gave me time to check the latest developments on my phone. Kingston's stock was still suspended after dropping 40%. 3 major institutional investors had demanded emergency meetings, and hashtag Kingston Crisis was trending on Twitter, with tech journalists piecing together the story of how an ousted daughter had orchestrated the biggest corporate takeover of the year. The boardroom doors opened to chaos. Dad was red-faced, shouting into his phone. Amanda sat rigid in her chair, 3 lawyers hovering around her. Marcus paced by the windows, looking like he hadn't slept. Only Tommy, present via video conference from Hong Kong, seemed calm, probably because he was the only one who'd known what was coming. Alexandra, Dad's voice cut through the noise. What have you done? I took my old seat at the table, not the one they'd relegated me to in recent months. but the one I'd earned through years of innovation and leadership. I protected my interests, I replied calmly, opening my laptop. Something you taught me to do, remember? By destroying the company, Marcus exploded. Our stock is worthless. Temporarily devalued, I corrected, which creates an excellent buying opportunity for investors who understand the company's true value. Speaking of which, I activated the room's main display, showing a comprehensive presentation of Kingston's technical infrastructure. Every patent, every innovation, every piece of intellectual property that made the company valuable. Let's talk about what really powers Kingston Technologies. I began, but Amanda cut in. We don't have time for technical presentations. We need to stop this attack on our company. Your company? I raised an eyebrow. Let's clarify ownership, shall we? Another slide appeared. A complex web of investment vehicles and holding companies, all leading back to Phoenix Group. My lawyers had spent months making this diagram clear enough for even Marcus to understand. As of midnight, I continued, Phoenix Group owns 51% of Kingston Technologies. Additionally, through various subsidiaries, we control patents crucial to 78% of Kingston's product line. Impossible, Dad whispered, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He was finally starting to understand. The shares you forced me to sell yesterday represented only a small portion of my holdings. While you were busy planning my removal, I was building something bigger. Something you couldn't take away. The board won't stand for this, Marcus declared, but his voice lacked conviction. The board, I smiled, is about to learn some interesting facts about recent management decisions. For instance, the real reason our Asian expansion struggled last quarter. Tommy? My younger brother's face filled one screen as he held up a folder. Full documentation of Marcus's failed attempts to override Alexandra's technical specifications in favor of cheaper alternatives. Cost to company, approximately $140 million. Marcus went pale. You kept records? I keep everything, I said quietly. Every meeting where you took credit for my work. Every time you undermined my authority. Every decision that put your ego ahead of the company's success. Alexandra, Dad started, his tone shifting to the one he used for business negotiations. Surely we can discuss this as a family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Was it family when you threatened to disown me? When you let your wife systematically undermine me? When you chose Marcus's ambition over my expertise? I pulled up another document, the original company charter, written by my grandfather. Kingston Technologies will always prioritize innovation over politics, merit over privilege, vision over tradition. I read aloud. Grandfather understood what made a technology company successful. He knew it wasn't about family names or corporate titles. It was about creating something valuable. What do you want? Amanda asked, her perfectly maintained facade finally cracking. Everything, I replied simply. The company returns to its original mission. The board is restructured to prioritize technical expertise over political connections. And the leadership, I paused, letting them hang on my words, reflects actual contribution to the company's success. You want to be CEO, Marcus said flatly. No, I corrected him. I already am CEO. The board will simply be confirming it formally in about 10 minutes. Dad stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. I won't allow this. Your permission isn't required, I said, pulling up the final document. This is a shareholders' meeting, and I hold the majority. But before we vote, you should know one more thing. I activated the last screen, a live feed from the patent office. Remember that quantum processing architecture that powers our most profitable products. The one Marcus has been taking credit for. In about 30 seconds, those patents transferred to Phoenix Group. Without them, Kingston Technologies loses 60% of its revenue overnight. The room erupted in shouts and protests, but I held up my hand. However, I continued once they quieted. I'm prepared to license those patents back to Kingston Technologies, under certain conditions. Name them, Dan said hoarsely. First, the company returns to its core values: innovation, merit, vision. Second, the board is restructured to include actual technical expertise. Third, I looked directly at Marcus. Everyone's contribution is properly credited and compensated. And if we refuse, Amanda challenged. I smiled, the same smile I'd given them yesterday when signing away my direct shares. Then Phoenix Group launches its own tech company, using all the patents and innovations I developed. Kingston Technologies becomes nothing but an empty shell with a famous name. The choice was clear. It took exactly 17 minutes for the board to vote me in as CEO. Marcus was relegated to a non-executive position. Dad became chairman emeritus, a title with prestige, but no real power. Amanda and her lawyers left quietly, their influence evaporating with their access to company resources. As the board filed out, Tommy's voice came through the video link. That was the most beautiful corporate takedown I've ever seen. I looked around the boardroom, my boardroom now, the place where, just yesterday, they tried to force me out of my own company. It wasn't about revenge, I said, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. No, Tommy agreed. It was about justice. About building something they couldn't steal or destroy. My phone buzzed with breaking news. Kingston stock was trading again, now up 10% on news of the leadership change. The market, it seemed, approved of having an actual innovator in charge. Dad lingered at the door, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Your mother, he said quietly, she always said you were the one who truly understood what Kingston Technologies could be. She was right, I replied, not looking up from my screens. She usually was. He nodded once and left, leaving me alone in the room where, just 24 hours ago, they'd thought they'd won. I pulled up the company's project dashboard, already planning the changes needed to return Kingston Technologies to its innovative roots. There would be time later for family reconciliation, for healing old wounds. But right now, there was work to do. Real work. The kind that changes industries, that builds futures, that creates legacies worth fighting for. They'd forced me to sign away my shares, thinking that paper could erase my contribution, my vision, my right to lead. Instead, they taught me the most valuable lesson in business. Sometimes you have to lose something small to win something bigger. And I'd won everything.